We have a special guest. I've come to know him through his show, and you can find it out on YouTube. It's Police Off the Cuff on YouTube. Definitely check it out and subscribe, like, and share his podcast. It's Bill Cannon. He's a retired NYPD homicide sergeant. Bill, thanks so much for taking some time today and doing this with us.
Well, it's great to be here. I feel like I don't get off the screen very often. I'm on more than I'm off, but it's all good.
I want to get into this because you're covering a big case right now as far as the Idaho case. You've had some really big guests on, and before we even got on here on the air, I even was talking to you a little bit about off the air about your show last night. And we hope people again subscribe, like, and share this podcast, but also subscribe to Bill's podcast, Police Off the Cuff. Bill, talk about this because this Idaho case is heating up. My question is with this is, you've been in the police force for quite a while. You're retired now, but you know these cases backwards and forwards. You've dealt with these cases. Can you speak to the viewers and the listeners about this case and what you think of this case so far? The police doing a good job, a mediocre job?
One thing I can't deny, and I don't like to beat down another police department. I don't like to criticize them. I don't have the internal look into the investigation. However, it's undeniable that the Moscow Police Department has no homicide experience. Their last murder was 7 years ago. Now, to get good at homicide investigation, you need experience. And unfortunately, to get experience, you need people to get killed, which is a horrible thing. But I was in a unit on the New York City Police Department known as Manhattan North Homicide Squad. And we had 1 lieutenant, 3 sergeants, and 18 detectives. And whenever there was a murder, we would go to the precinct detective squad that had it, and we would assist them. We didn't catch the case because that would have created a lot of animosity. The precinct squad caught the case, and we would have a companion detective from homicide work the case with them because we had the experience. So they had this experience because, look, there's even squads in Manhattan that don't have a lot of homicide experience. The 2-0 on the Upper West Side, the 19th on the Upper East Side, Central Park. They don't have a lot of murder experience. So they really can use the assistance of the homicide squad. Now, getting back to Moscow, they don't have that experience. You could see it in the words of the bosses of that Captain Lanier, who's running the investigation. Mm-hmm. He's very articulate. He's a good police boss, but he also doesn't have homicide experience. It's huge. I mentioned on the show last night that police departments and law enforcement are one of the only jobs on this earth where 80% of your training is on the job, So therefore, experience becomes that much more important. So what do? They did something very smart. They invited and they asked the FBI to come in pretty much day one, and the Idaho State Police, which would conceivably have much more homicide experience, because then when you widen the geographic area to the whole state instead of just a little town like Moscow, they're obviously going to get some murders in the whole state of Idaho, which the state police will be working on. So they'll have some experienced investigators. Now, the way it works is that the police department in the jurisdiction of the murder is the ones who run the investigation. In this case, I'm pretty sure that they're getting a lot of assistance from the Idaho State Police and the FBI. That 2-year detective is definitely not running this case because, first of all, you shouldn't even be a detective there after 2 years. And that's on any police department. You don't have enough experience. You don't have enough time making arrests, doing interviews, doing interrogations, doing anything police related. So the fact that they, as a figurehead, he's the lead detective, that's sort of ridiculous. And it was sort of, in my opinion, a bad look for them to allow a 2-year veteran to catch this case. Even if it's only in name, it's not a good look,
Can we talk about the victimology in that murder,
Sure.
The method of murder, please?
Victimology in any homicide investigation is absolutely one of the most important things, because without knowing who the victim is, you really don't have a place to start. So in this case, it's exacerbated by the fact that there's 4 victims. So now you have to do the study of the background of each victim. So what are we finding out? We want to find out their habits, their alcohol use, their drug use, if any, their sexual habits, whether they have a boyfriend, girlfriend, cars they drive, their finances. What, do they work out? Who do they hang with? All of these things comprise victimology. Speak to their family, speak to their friends, speak to their professors. You could see it's voluminous. There's something like a database called mind mapping or data mining. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but you can put someone in there and just start in the middle circle and put Bill Cannon, and then start going outwards with that. Lives at blah blah blah, owns this car, is a podcaster, retired. Before you know it, the whole page or chalkboard is filled with information. Potentially, all of those little tidbits can lead to knowledge that will help you in solving the case. And these days, I mentioned data mining or mind mapping. You can use a computer to do that. So all of these things, the attributes of a victim, raise questions. And every time you raise a question, you get an answer. And when you get an answer, that builds more questions. And that's how investigation is done. One of the things I said early on here is that they should have definitely interviewed every single member of the fraternity that Ethan was in, and every single member of the sorority. I don't know if they did that, but I think that's where you get your best information, and then canvass the neighborhood. Go out to the bars they hang out in, which it seems like they've done. Look, there should be a wealth of forensic evidence in this case, and I think everyone expected there to be that smoking gun piece of evidence. The smoking gun piece, of course, would be to find that weapon. They have never found the weapon. And right now, there's conjecture on what type of weapon it is. Based on the horrendous nature of the wounds, some have predicted that it was a K-bar knife, similar to the type of knives that the United States Marines carry. But there's no confirmation on that because they never recovered it. There's the potentiality that another type of weapon could have caused those wounds. Now, we don't specifically know what type of wounds because we haven't seen the photos. We haven't spoken to the pathologist. The coroner apparently has spoken to the family and let out some information that probably shouldn't have gone out there. Whether the family should know that or not, we can argue that point. But I think that's why the police and the coroner weren't releasing a lot of this information, because once, specifically Steve Gonsalves, once he was told, and I don't want to put him down at all, he's a grieving father, he's in trauma, but once he's told information, it seems like he goes on media and discusses what he knows, and then it's out there for everyone to see.
What is your opinion? Is this like a cat and mouse game right now with, the police aren't telling anybody anything, the FBI isn't telling anybody anything. They may know who this man is, or maybe it's a couple of men. Regardless of that, they're keeping it to themselves, close to the vest, because they want to make sure when they catch this man or men, that when they get him, they're going down 100%. And this is a cat and mouse game. Do you believe that that's what's going on here right now?
I think they may, and I say may because I'm not sure,
Right.
have a direction, have certain things they're looking at, certain patterns of evidence that is telling them certain things. But I think they're still at the exploration phase. I don't think they have a clear view of where they're going right now. I mean, this car, Hyundai Elantra, the 2011, 2013, when they brought this up right away, I was thinking, this is the perp's car. This is no 4 witnesses or 2 witnesses or 1 witness they want to speak to. No, they're putting a lot of onus on this. This is the car that the perpetrator used to flee the scene. And don't forget, again, I feel like I'm being repetitive, but because I talked about this earlier on in many shows, one of the two most important things about this is the area of entry. Where did the perpetrator go to get into the house?
Mhm.
And the area of exit. And we don't know, did the perpetrator leave a blood trail? Do they know where he came in? Do they know where he left? Because that would tell us where he was going. Did he walk through the woods and have his car parked somewhere else? Or did he simply walk through the woods and lives close by in the area and walk? Because so far, they have no video, they have no evidence of him coming or going. And that's a little strange, especially with a crime scene that was this bloody, that the perpetrator didn't leave evidence, a blood trail, or are there? We don't know. Are there bloody footprints? There has to be. That much blood, he had to have stepped in the blood, right? So what does the bottom of his shoes look like? All of those things. Did he leave trace evidence? You know, there's a thing called Locard's theory of exchange by Dr. Edmund Locard. And it simply means when you go into a crime scene, you leave something of yourself there. And when you leave the crime scene, you take something from the crime scene out. And that has to do with crime scene security and keeping it as pristine as possible. You see now, they just had something this morning. Two guys went into the crime scene and just went in there for 20 minutes and left. Like, what is that? You know, I mean, first of all, we're told that, you know, that the crime scene's been closed, you know, that they buttoned it up and they no longer need the crime scene. Did they go in to take pictures? What did they go in to do? We don't know, you know.
There was two people, and I don't know which two, but there was two people that got murdered on the third floor and then on the first floor. I'm not sure. I think the first floor was the two girls,
It
and then
was
upstairs.
well, no,
Go
it was
ahead.
Ethan Chapin and Kaylee, excuse me, Ethan Chapin and Zaina Canodal that were murdered on the second floor.
Second floor, I'm sorry.
And Madison Morgan and Kaylee Gonsalves were on the third floor.
And I know this has to do with, were they drunk? Were they doing drugs? I'm speaking about the other two girls that said they didn't hear anything. They woke up the next day around 12 o'clock, called the cops. You know, my thing is that's all well and good. And I know, and you said this last night on your program, that listen, if somebody's getting stuck with 11, 12-inch knife, they're not going to make a screaming sound or not. My question is, you know, if I'm just under the impression if somebody comes into the house and is walking up the stairs to the second floor, they're walking around on the first floor. If I'm in a bedroom, you know, I would think I would hear something, maybe look around, say, you know, who's that? Or is that the, you know, one of my friends that lives in the other room or not? Even if I don't get up, I'm thinking also, if these girls have the defensive wounds, yeah, maybe they didn't scream because it was an 11, 12-inch knife, and they're not going to make a scream if you're stabbing them all those times. I'm just kind of boggles my mind that these two girls were cleared pretty early. They were in the house, 12 o'clock to call the police. What if you got to get up to go to the toilet? I just, I don't
You
know.
know,
It's a lot there.
I think that has a lot to do also with the physical construction of that house. It's
Hmm.
almost like the first floor was more like the basement, and it was almost like
Yeah.
detached from or an addition onto the house. That potentially they'd interviewed people that had previously lived there, and they said they could really not hear anything from the other two floors. So that
Okay.
has as much to do maybe with the construction of the house, and maybe also they could have been drunk. The two girls on the first floor, they could have had earbuds in, the way so many college kids go to sleep these days, right? Apparently their doors were locked, so they were buttoned up for the night. I can't explain that. I
Yeah, but
don't.
if you're the murderer, Bill, and you know this guy definitely had knowledge of who lived in that house. He definitely knew the schematics and the blueprints, whatever you want to call it, of that house and where everybody lived and where everybody was. Why would you leave, whether those girls were sleeping, drunk, high, whatever they were, why would you leave them alive for them to, you know, maybe this person was in the house, maybe those girls knew, you know, I know there's a lot of hypotheticals here, but why would you leave those two girls alive? That's what I guess I'm saying. If you're the murderer, why not just kill everybody and then no one knows anything?
Well, I think that after he killed 4 people, he was in escape mode. He was
Okay.
in, let me get the hell out of here. And
Right.
did he even try those 2 doors? And maybe he tried them, realized they were locked, and was like, you know, something, I killed 4 people. Let me get the hell out of this house. I'm just conjecturing. I don't, of course,
Yeah,
know
well,
that
it's
for a
all
fact.
hypothetical,
But
right?
what we do know is these 2 girls are alive today, and apparently they didn't hear anything. Which, you know, many people, like, I call them talking heads. All these people, these pseudo experts on these channels. You know, I think everyone that ever worked for the FBI is a talking head right now. Some better than others. Some are very, very good. Some I'm just like, that guy should stay retired and not show his face, you know. But some of them are very good. I really like this guy named Craig McCrary, who was on Banfield, and he was like a profiler, a behavioral analyst. And one of the things I don't like about a lot of these behavioral analysts is when they speak in absolutes. Because, dude, behavioral analysis is not an exact science. So stop pretending that it is. You can make a hypothesis based on certain things. Because let's face it, the FBI has been wrong, and laughably wrong, in a lot of big cases. The Beltway sniper. Oh, it's a male white 35. That was embarrassing. The guy was a male black 17. You know, so let's not pretend that this is an exact science. I'm going to get beaten up for saying this, but I firmly believe that. The Unabomber, they had no clue who he was. And his brother gave him up, or he might still be out there. You know, so behavioral analysis is just that. It's a hypothesis, which is
Right.
an educated guess, you know. So so many, anyway, that getting back to that Craig McClure, he had said, everyone said, because the wounds that Kaylee Gonsalves received were more severe than anyone else's, is that she was targeted. They jumped right to that. Is that a possibility? Yes. Is that an educated guess? Yes. But he said it doesn't necessarily mean that. What it could mean is that she fought back the hardest, and as a result received much more severe wounds. And I was like, I'm so glad that he said that, because there's no absolutes in that. That's my whole point.
Yeah, no one knows anything until maybe when the perpetrator's caught, then maybe we'll find out more information if he comes clean. Or like you said, maybe they know a lot of these things and they're just because if it goes out to the media and the guy is watching the TV or listening to the radio, he knows how to, do an exit plan.
There's
But
no doubt he's watching this stuff. There's no doubt he's watching TV. There's no doubt he's watching these podcasts. And he's laughing. He's like saying, "Oh, they think I did this. They think they'll never catch me." That type of thing. But I believe there is going to be an arrest in this case. I firmly believe that, and I think science is what's going to catch this guy.
the DNA evidence, there was a lot of talk about that under a couple of the females that got murdered under their fingernails. If that is the case, and we've heard a lot about that, some people walked that back and said that wasn't necessarily 100% true. But if that is true and there is some DNA evidence, which I'm sure there is in the house, but again, as you've talked about in many of your shows, there's so many people in that house that were partying and going over there to hang around. We don't know who's who, and it's going to take a long time for them to figure out that information. But if there is that DNA evidence with the fingernails, would they be able to find out who that was with that DNA evidence under the girl's fingernails?
Well, the answer to that is yes. However, that they need something to compare it to. So if this person that committed this crime is not in CODIS, and for those out there that don't know what CODIS is the national database that is collected or looked over by the FBI. They control it. It stands for Combined DNA Index System. So if someone's arrested for a felony or certain misdemeanors, we take DNA from them, all right? And there's 2 types of DNA in CODIS. The first is offender DNA, which means you've been arrested before and they took your DNA. And the second is forensic DNA. That's unidentified DNA from crime scenes, which this could be. This could go in there as forensic DNA. hoping that maybe this perpetrator will get arrested for something else. And all of a sudden it'll be like, wow, it popped. The guy whose DNA was in the crime scene in Idaho, his DNA just popped on a robbery or DNA on an assault or anything. So there's a lot of DNA in CODIS that's forensic that has never been identified.
But this guy would more so be hanging out underground right now. There's a lot of people looking for someone like him, even though maybe they don't know his identity. If he does something crazy and out of the ordinary and gets, pulled over or something, this could be a bad
right. But
way for,
we
go ahead.
don't know if they recovered unidentified DNA, say, which we would expect. We said it a million times. Everyone else has said it. There's a really good chance that the perpetrator in this case cut himself. Therefore, his blood would be in the crime scene, commingled with the blood belonging to the victims. Have they identified that blood? And if they have identified unidentifiable blood, that's the perpetrator's, because the other blood would be identifiable. It would be the victim's blood. But again, there's a good chance if they do have an unidentified blood sample, that the perpetrator is not in CODIS and they could not make a connection.
Bill Cannon, he's a retired NYPD homicide sergeant, police off the cuff on YouTube. Definitely check him out. Subscribe, like, and share on there too. Bill, I want to get into some of these audience questions about policing. We're seeing a lot now about robots. We just heard about this with the San Francisco Police Department, where they're trying out robots on the streets to help cops that are in dangerous situations. They're not talking about how many they have or what type of situations they're going to put these robots in. Is this the next kind of effort that police are going to be using to make sure that they don't get killed with kind of robots, maybe drones? Are we seeing that now in policing?
Look, there's all kinds of new technology in policing, and it is designed to make policing safer. For example, we have something called ShotSpotter. We have facial recognition, right? We have geographical profiling. There's so many new tools that the police can use. In investigation, there's so many different things. However, all of these get challenged, by the ACLU, and right. They're claiming, facial recognition is prejudicial to people of color. ShotSpotter is prejudicial to people. Everything is prejudicial, When you're talking about robots, they had one in New York City that looked a little scary, and it could climb stairs and go up, and has a camera on it, of course. I don't know if these robots were weaponized, but right away, some of the leftist politicians, that's horrible, and they voted it down. And New York City is in crisis. New York City is where Chicago was. And look where Chicago is now. This is the beginning of New York becoming Chicago. They have the most ridiculous woke politicians that at every step of the way have thwarted the efforts of the police department. And the worst are the district attorneys. They don't want to prosecute. They're destroying retail establishments because they refuse to prosecute for petty larceny. So people just go in stores with impunity and just steal, and they're not being stopped, and they don't prosecute them. They're putting stores like the big drug chains and out of business because the theft is unbelievable. That is an attack on our country. That is an attack on capitalism. They refuse to prosecute. This is, to me, and you got me on my soapbox. The district attorney in Manhattan right now, his name is Alvin Bragg.
Yeah, he
should be fired immediately, him and his whole crew. Yeah. He actually has the nerve to say a robbery first degree with a gun, if no one is hurt and they're just robbed, we're going to plead it down to a misdemeanor. That is corruption at its worst, in my mind. If you have a gun stuck in your face and someone says, give me your money, that's a horrendous crime, in my mind. Whether they hurt you or shoot you or not, you're hurt psychologically. They're going to really plead this down. Who gave them that power? Who gave them that authority? The law says that robbery first degree is a C felony. All right, which the letter C correlates to a certain prison term for that. Who gave the district attorney power to, to just disregard the criminal procedure law and decide they're going to downgrade that to a misdemeanor? That is corruption of the worst point. And they're going to point at police corruption. Let's point at the district attorney's office.
There's a lot of police that are retiring right now because they're put in these very bad situations where they can't defend themselves or the people that want them to defend them. And you talked about Alvin Bragg. He's a clown. I agree with you 100%. Besides that, we have they have a mayor, I should say, in New York City that was a police, was in the police. He was supposed to be somebody that I thought was going to be good for the police. And I don't know if his hands are tied or it's something to do with the insane governor up there. I'm trying to use very nice words, Bill, and I don't want to get too.
Eric Adams, the mayor, he was a police captain, but he was never the real police. He was an activist, even when he was a cop.
Okay,
I'm telling you the truth. He was an activist.
No. I believe you. I don't think he's doing a good job at all. Go ahead.
If people, but something, of the 10 candidates that on the Democratic ticket that were candidates for mayor, he was the least bad. That's all I can. There were some total communists, just ridiculous leftists that just. I mean, you can't even imagine what the city would. The city's on a spiral now, and the New York City, if they don't change up in 5 or 10 years, it's going to be Chicago. Because
when did this start? Was this De Blasio and now
De Blasio did more damage to New York City in 8 years than any 10 mayors that did damage. He was worse than David Dinkins. He was horrendous.
So how do you? No, I agree with you 100%. We're on the same page with all these, with all this information, I should say. Let's just get to the meat and potatoes. These people say defund the police. My thing is, it seems like we've already, in these big cities, we've already defunded the police, or the police are retiring in droves. And they say, oh, well, there's bad apples on the police. There's bad apples in every profession. That doesn't mean that the whole department is a bunch of bad apples. It could be 1 or 2 people. So how can you even change these people's minds that are, voicing this liberal rhetoric that is ruining not just New York City, not just Chicago, but cities all around the country in a time of, political upheaval, when we have an administration that doesn't really care about the police. This is from Washington on down. It just seems like this country is in crisis. Like you said, you can go on Twitter and watch the videos of what you're speaking about. But how do we support the police? How do we keep people that are good policemen in the police when we have these so-called leaders of our country that want to defund the police, belittle the police, and all this other woke bullshit that they're pushing? I'm sorry I rambled, but it is ridiculous.
Well, I think historically it all comes out of the Black Lives Matter, the riots, the 2 years of riots, which the Democrats called peaceful protest, even though 20 people lost their lives during that. They were burning police stations. They forgot about that. Antifa doesn't exist. All of this crap, And, to tell you, the Democrats were behind defunding the police. Now they're like, it never happened. Wait a minute. But we have recordings of you saying it. So you can't deny it. So now, look, in New York City, the police are still trying to do their job. Right. Then they make an arrest of a serious offense, and the DA's office cuts them loose that night. So the old catch and release, you've heard that. It's true. It's catch and release. They're going to destroy this democracy if this continues, and the whole thing comes out of decarceral policies. And that comes out of decarceral, meaning they don't want to put anyone in jail or in prison. They want diversion programs, like anger management, drug rehab, Alcoholics Anonymous, counseling. Okay, yeah, the guy stuck a gun in someone's face. Let's give him counseling, No, he needs a jail cell. That's his counseling. A prison cell he needs. I just find it to be unbridled corruption. And, all these DA's offices also have something called the Conviction Integrity Unit. So they're going back to cases that happened 10 and 15 years ago, and they're trying to find something wrong with the case so they can cut the guy loose out of state prison. Well, I'm talking about murderers. Yeah. It's outrageous. The corruption is unbelievable, and they need to shine a light on that corruption. They really do. They were looking into a case that I had worked on, this guy Paul Cortez that killed this dancer. They were looking into that. And his bloody fingerprint was found on the wall of the apartment that he stabbed his girlfriend, almost cut her head off. And they were looking, he did do it after all. Yeah, he did. Yeah. And 99% of the cases, they're guilty. So you want to cut them out of state prison? It's beyond, it's crazy. It really is crazy.
But again, the problem is, my opinion is not the police. It's these people like these DAs that just keep letting, it's like a circle. The guy gets arrested, the woman gets arrested, they send them right in and then right out again. And then they get arrested again, in and out. Anyways, it's just a joke. But how would you get to these people that just keep bringing up this reoccurring argument that we got to defund the police because they are running like a military now?
I can't even argue with people like that, because I just think they're so misguided. They're so politically incorrect. I think they need I don't know. They really look. New York City, Manhattan, voted 97% for Hochul for governor.
It's disgusting.
97% of the voters voted for Hochul. They're going to get what they deserve. They're talking about this whole thing with congestion pricing. I don't know if you know what that is. That's when people drive into the city. They want to hit them for like $23 if they go below a certain street. You know what that's my theory, what that's for? The MTA, which is an organization that's run by the state, should be disbanded. The CEO makes crazy money. He's a blowhard. Get rid of that guy. Because there's crime, it's out of control, it's filthy. There's rats the size of pit bulls in the subway system. It's mismanaged. They want more increases in fares.
Right.
Congestion pricing is to pay for the MTA, the incompetence of the MTA. Let's charge these poor people driving these carbon-burning vehicles into our city. Let's charge them $23 on their Easy Pass, and that will pay for the turnstile jumpers. Isn't it brilliant? Because we won't arrest them because we have carceral policies by the DA's office, even though theft of service in the subway system is a proven tactic that works in getting guns and criminals out of the subway system. Let's get rid of that. Let's just let them jump the turnstile, Look, every felony that's committed in the subway, do you think the guy that committed it paid his fare?
No.
No, of course not. Let's have the guy driving his car from the suburbs pay that guy's fare,
Bill, I want to be respectful for your time, and we'll end there. And thanks so much for your service, and you and the other people that are fighting the good fight every day in New York City, around the country in general. These are the people that are putting up with the cesspool of that our country has turned into, unfortunately.
Well, certain cities and certain states, it's just, that's why I'm in Florida right now.
I hear you, and I'll be, God willing, I'll be back down there soon.
Everyone's fleeing to Florida now.
Yeah, but anyways, Bill, we'll end there. Bill Cannon, again, can you tell people where they can find more about you? Again, the YouTube page, if you got a Twitter, a Facebook, wherever else.
We're on Police Off the Cuff. Real Crime Stories is actually the name of my show. You can go right on YouTube. We're also on 9 listening sites. Anchor, Google, Spotify. They're all on Anchor, so you can listen to us in your car while you're driving. If you want to get annoyed and hear me do a rant, you can go on our listening sites in the car, or you can just listen to our YouTube on the phone. But look, I so respect policing as a profession, and I think in the last 4 or 5 years they've been attacking it unrelentlessly. And the cities that really believe in defunding and all, you can see how they're suffering. Crime is out of control.
Right. Bill Cannon, thanks so much for your time. I greatly appreciate this.
All right, Rob, my pleasure.